On a forgotten island in the middle of the Pacific, almost every man met a violent end. But this story didn't begin with blood, it began with defiance. A rebellion that would shake the British Empire to its core. When a handful of sailors aboard His Majesty's ship Bounty turned on their captain, they weren't just rejecting command, they were fleeing the very world they came from. Their desperate voyage across the Pacific would carry them to one of the most remote corners of the planet. A place so isolated, it seemed untouched by time itself. That place was Pitcairn, but the story of Pitcairn doesn't begin with the British. Centuries earlier, around the 11th century, Polynesians had already reached this lonely volcanic island. They arrived with animals, tools, and the knowledge of the sea, carving out a settlement amid cliffs of black rock and forests alive with birdsong. The island was rich in obsidian and precious stone, materials they used for tools and trade. They built homes, grew crops, and fished in the deep blue waters that surrounded them. For 4 centuries, life here seemed almost idyllic. Their only contact with the outside world was through trade with Mangareva, an island some 300 miles away. But as Pitcairn's natural resources dwindled, trade declined. Soon, the people of Pitcairn began to fight among themselves for what little remained. Civil wars broke out, small, bloody conflicts on a small patch of land. With no escape across the vast Pacific, starvation and violence took their toll. In the end, the Polynesians of Pitcairn disappeared completely. The jungle reclaimed their villages. The island fell silent. That silence lasted for centuries, until 1787, when the HMS Bounty set sail from England. The ship's mission sounded harmless enough: to collect breadfruit trees from Tahiti and deliver them to the Caribbean as a cheap food source for enslaved laborers. But what began as a botanical expedition became one of history's most famous mutinies. The Bounty crew spent months in Tahiti, a paradise compared to life aboard a naval ship. There the men found warmth, beauty, and freedom unlike anything they had known. When Captain William Bligh ordered them to depart, many resisted. They had tasted a different life and they couldn't let it go. Fletcher Christian, the ship's second in command, finally led the revolt. Bligh and 18 loyal men were set adrift in a small, open boat, left to die in the endless Pacific. But Bligh survived, navigating more than 4,000 miles to safety, a feat still considered one of the greatest acts of seamanship in history. And when he returned to Britain, he vowed revenge. Meanwhile, Christian and the mutineers fled back to Tahiti. They knew the British Navy would hunt them down. So they gathered several Tahitian men and women, loaded supplies, and vanished into the ocean, searching for a place where no ship would ever find them. Months later, they discovered Pitcairn Island, unmarked on most maps and shielded by sheer cliffs and treacherous reefs. It was the perfect hiding place. At first, life on Pitcairn seemed peaceful. 9 European sailors, a dozen Tahitian women, and 6 Tahitian men began a new colony far from the reach of any law. They planted gardens, built homes from the timbers of the Bounty, and even burned the ship to ensure no one could ever leave, or ever find them. But paradise quickly began to rot from within. Jealousy and greed poisoned the small community. McCoy, one of the sailors, discovered how to distill alcohol from the island's roots, and soon drunkenness ruled their days. The Tahitian men resented their treatment by the Europeans, and the imbalance between men and women made tensions explode. Arguments turned to violence, and violence turned to murder. In a wave of brutal revenge, the Tahitian men killed most of the European mutineers, only for the surviving women to later kill the Tahitian men in their sleep. In a few short years, nearly everyone was dead. Only one European man remained, John Adams. Haunted by guilt, Adams turned to the Bible salvaged from the Bounty. He began to teach the surviving women and children to read and pray. Over the years, he transformed the chaos into a small, devout Christian community. When British ships rediscovered Pitcairn in 1808, they found Adams as a patriarch, a calm, religious man guiding a society of women and children. To the sailors who met him, he seemed like a prophet who had built heaven on earth. But beneath the hymns and prayers lay generations born from violence, isolation, and survival. As decades passed, Adams's influence shaped the island. The community adopted strict Christian morals, outlawed alcohol, and established simple schools and laws. After Adams's death, new leaders emerged, some kind, others ambitious. One of them even claimed to be appointed by the British Crown, only to be exposed as a fraud and expelled. Despite its remote location, Pitcairn slowly connected with the wider world. By the early 1900s, the island had its own post office, a small government, and growing contact with missionaries. The people converted to the Seventh-day Adventist faith, a Christian denomination that would define the island's identity for over a century. They destroyed their pigs, banned alcohol again, and clung to their faith as their anchor in an empty ocean. But the past has a way of returning, even to the most isolated place on Earth. By the early 2000s, Pitcairn's population had fallen to around 60 people, all descendants of the mutineers and their Tahitian companions. Then came a shocking revelation. In 2004, investigators uncovered decades of sexual abuse on the island. 7 men, including the mayor and the magistrate, were charged with dozens of crimes, some involving children. A prison was built on the island, and for the first time the world looked at Pitcairn not as a romantic relic of the past, but as a community haunted by generational trauma. Years later, the island's new mayor, brother of the acquitted magistrate, was himself arrested for possessing child pornography. It was as if the darkness that began centuries ago had never truly left. Today, Pitcairn Island is home to barely 50 residents. They live surrounded by cliffs, tropical forests, and an ocean so vast that the nearest civilization lies more than 3,000 miles away. It remains Britain's smallest territory and one of the most remote communities on Earth. Every person here carries the bloodline of rebellion, survival, and faith. Every family name traces back to the Bounty. From its volcanic peaks to its sunlit shores, Pitcairn still looks like paradise. But its history tells another story, one of greed, isolation, and the darker corners of human nature. An island born from mutiny and burdened by it ever since. In the end, Pitcairn is more than a place on a map. It's a mirror, reflecting both the best and the worst of what humanity becomes when it's left entirely alone.